everyone, I'm Stephanie.
And I'm Allison.
And this is Nerd of the Week, a randomly generated fandom podcast. Allison, shall we ask the generator to remind everyone what our word is this week?
Let's go!
The word of the week is spy.
And the definition of spy is a person who secretly collects and reports information on the activities, movements, and plans of an enemy or competitor. There's also an alternative definition to work for the government or other organization by secretly collecting information about enemies or competitors.
Those are kind of similar definitions, but okay.
I think it's trying to say it can be a noun or a verb, I guess.
All right. Cool.
Fun. So I am bringing to the table kind of a wild ride. I have just recently finished the first game, and I need to talk to someone about it. And it definitely fits the word spy. So I'm talking about Danganronpa, or Trigger Happy Havoc.
I've heard of this, yes.
Okay.
And you thought I hadn't.
I wasn't sure. It's kind of an obscure video game that I guess
wait,
is...
hold on now. I'd heard of the anime.
Yeah, so the game inspired some live plays, and then it also has a couple of sequels in the games. And
okay.
There's the anime that's the direct, it's the same story as Trigger Happy Havoc, and then they have another anime that is like after the events of Trigger Happy Havoc.
Okay.
So,
well, I've not seen them, so I don't know the story at all.
Okay. So, mild content warning. There is like murder because it's a murder mystery thing. So if that's not your shtick, just jump to Allison's bit. But the word is spy. So,
I guess I didn't give any sort of content warning last week.
I was just thinking because this one has like, so basically it's a murder school. So
I
just
see.
jump into
Okay.
it. So there's a lot of murder involved. And so it's just a little bit of just, in case that's not your shtick, I just move on and that's fine. What it is, so it's a visual novel adventure game, what I'm talking about, what I consumed as media. Originally published by Spike Games, which no longer exists. They're now a different company that like got merged with Spike. But it started as a Japanese game that got ported over to the US, I think in 2012 or 2010. The timeline's a little bit different depending on like where it got ported and which game it was available for. But I believe it was available for the PlayStation Vita, which was like a handheld PlayStation console. Mm-hmm. And you play as a high school student named Makoto Nagi, Naegi. It sets up as there's Hope's Peak Academy, which is this school for like gifted kids who are like the ultimate in their fields, the kind of being like the ultimate pop star, the ultimate detective, the ultimate clairvoyant. Like they have all these like the best of these things, right? And so Makoto won a lottery, and so he's the ultimate lucky student, and he is going into this school as the ultimate lucky student. And so he's all excited about this because he's technically by his own volition like doesn't have any special skills, so getting into this high prestigious school is going to help his social status and all like that.
Mm-hmm. All right.
So that's kind of the setup of him being all excited to go to this school. So he gets there, you see him outside looking at Hope's Peak Academy, and he walks in and then he immediately passes out. And he was supposed to go to like the welcome ceremony, and then he wakes up passed out on a desk, like he had fallen asleep during a class. And he's like, where am I? What's going on? And he walks out into the lobby area. There's no one there. There's like an announcement that goes off that says like everyone meet at the front doors. So he goes there and there's 15 students all standing there, and he introduces themselves to everybody, figuring out everybody's names and what their ultimate is, and their like special skills and all that. And then here we meet Monokuma. And Monokuma is the bear face of the game. He's the one that's like half black, half white, and the black side of his face has like that evil like red eye and the wicked grin. He's the one that if you have heard of this and you've seen anything, he's going to be on the face of all the Danganronpa things because he's the main antagonist of the series.
Okay.
And he's an adorable little bear. And he goes over the rules of the game, which are they are locked in the school. There's no way out. The only way out is to graduate. And by graduating, you have to murder a classmate and get away with it. Yeah. So what happens? So it's a killing game. So what happens is a murder is supposed to happen. And then there'll be a class trial or some digging of information. And the class trial happens. And then they talk about all the clues and things. And then if you get away with it, you get to graduate and everyone else dies, but you get to leave the school. So everyone is incredulous. Everyone's like, who would do this? This is insane. Like, why are we here? And then Monokuma's like, don't worry, it'll happen. And wahaha, right? Mm-hmm. So Monokuma leaves everyone to go to their rooms and start this nonsense, this crazy like murder school thing. And there's a girl in the class, her name is Sayaka, and she and Makoto went to like elementary school together, so they knew each other before all of this like nonsense happened. And Sayaka is the ultimate pop star, I think. Yeah, so she...
Very murdery. Oh my.
Very murdery. She's the ultimate pop star, and she is excited that Makoto's there, and she's worried that someone's going to kill her because she's famous and well-known. And so she starts to talk up to Makoto about like switching rooms because then no one will know that she's in that room, that kind of thing. And Makoto's like, don't worry, I'll protect you. And that makes sense to me. And they are kind of just discussing like who would even do such a thing and that kind of stuff. And so the game kind of plays out where you have like your daily life free time where you can walk around and like talk to people, get their backstories, learn more about each character. You get these like nice coins, which are like Makoto faced coins that you can put into a slot machine to get out presents to like give to people. And then if you give people the right presents, then you can like learn more about their backstories. And it's kind of like a dating sim in that regards where you're interacting and getting to know people. So this game is a lot of things. And I don't know that it knew what it wanted to be. But the story is fascinating. And I've discovered that I don't listen to murder podcasts. I listen to like weird murder thrillers with a lot of lore behind them. And so that's Danganronpa. So first day goes by, and then the next morning, Monokuma was like, you guys are not killing each other. I expected more murders by now. You know, like, normal people totally not going to go around just murdering people, but it's fine. And then, we get to the first murder, and it happens in Makoto's room because Makoto and Sayaka switched places. Oh. And Sayaka is actually, unfortunately, the first one to die. Aww. The friend. And they find her in the bathroom, and she's written the numbers 11037 in her own blood on the wall behind behind her as she's dying. Now, for me, immediately, like, I see what they're trying to do. It's like the introduction of the game. Like, this is how we're going to do things. You're going to dig out clues. And when you look at the numbers, it looks like the name Leon flipped upside down, and Leon is one of the characters in there. So this game gets very frustrating because you can figure out stuff very quickly. And then the characters sit there and be like, I wonder what 11037 means for like an hour. So they go through, they figure out a lot of or they find a lot of clues. It turns out Sayaka got a DVD that showed her pop star friends or the other people in her pop group, in danger. And so she was trying to get out quickly so that she could go find them and help them. And it turns out a lot of people got these videos as like the first motive to try to convince people to get out. Like, if you get out quickly, you might be able to save your family or save your friends or whatever. Makoto got one that was of his family, and then the next picture was the couch that they were all sitting on was just like torn to shreds. So that was kind of like the first motive, because Monokuma is trying to just push people into this killing game to get them started. You get to the first class trial after you've found a couple of the clues, including like a shattered crystal ball, a burnt shirt. There's an incinerator that it looks like someone was trying to get rid of a bunch of evidence. And then the class trial is like in the basement of this place. Like, the school doesn't look like it's that big. And then like you go into this elevator and it goes down, and then there's like this big like courtroom type setting with a like circle for everyone to stand at and then just like look at each other while they just shout accusations at each other. And it's very Phoenix Wright, where all of this evidence is like circumstantial and not like true solid evidence that would get someone convicted, but it's also a video game, so you just kind of accept it and move on. And you go through the first trial. And my main gripe with this game is that it's also trying to be like a DDR type game, Dance Dance Revolution. Because like people will start to fight you and be like, I can't believe that you would even be right. And instead of having like a debate, you just have to like time your button presses correctly. And then Makoto basically shouts back, "You're wrong," or "I know the truth," and things like that. And this gameplay is just a little bit all over the place. And there's another bit in the game called the Hangman's Gambit, which is literally just the game Hangman. And I've heard this game like described as, you know, the murder weapon is a knife, but can you spell it? Mwahaha.
What?
So you have to like spell out the word knife for everyone to know what like the murder weapon is at playing Hangman and things like that. This game is wild. This is why I need to talk about it. This game is so wild. So and the other part is the truth bullets. So there'll be like a discussion going on, and like one person will be like, "There's no way that Sayaka was murdered by this person," and then you'd shoot a truth bullet at those words, which always show up as like a different color, and then you are like, "No, it could be this person because I found their bloody sleeve on the floor," and the timing is always a little bit off. I played this in like super easy mode, and then I ended up admittedly just watching the Game Grumps play through it because I was like, I do not have the hand-eye coordination for this game.
Wait, please define Game Grumps.
Game Grumps are YouTubers.
Oh, okay.
They're Let's Players, and they've played through this first series, and I think they're playing through the second one now. So, because I was going to try doing this, and I just do not have the hand-eye coordination, so I ended up watching their playthrough of it to absorb this media, because I was super interested in the plot and the story and all that. So, shout out to Game Grumps. And, yeah, so we go through the first class trial, as kind of like the easy mode on how to collect evidence, figure out who did it, and then you all elect or have to vote on who was the murderer. And if you got it right and you discovered what Monokuma calls the blackened, the person who murdered the person, then they get punishment. And then if the blackened gets away with it, then everyone else dies and the blackened gets to graduate. And there's this first one with the 11037. You all select Leon Kuwata, the ultimate baseball star, because he had a crystal ball, and the incinerator is just this like nonsensical thing. The incinerator, you couldn't turn it on and also open a door at the same time. But if you were the ultimate baseball star, you could throw a ball really hard and hit a button and then also turn something on. And that's how they figured out that he was the villain of the whole story, or of this arc. Mm-hmm. And then the punishment time is, so like completely different animation, from the like, visual novel where it's just like a flat cardboard cutout. of a person just showing up in the screen with some like vague background in the back. And instead it's more of like a full animation. And Leon is punished because he's the ultimate baseball star. He gets like pelted with baseballs till he dies. And you're like, okay, this is how this is gonna go. And then they move on, and then they're into day 2. And the most hilarious part of this game to me is how quickly they're like, oh my god, that was horrible. Well, now we have a pool. And so they're all excited about swimming in a pool again. You're like, but someone just died and you're in a murder game, but we're just not going to talk about it? All right, that's fine. I guess we can go back to free time and just giving people silly presents. I don't know how much of a spoiler you want me to go through. I can go through each of the murders, or we can just do a broad literary analysis of this game.
How many murders are there?
So there are 15 people.
Oh my gosh.
And 10 people die. So I'll get to the spy bit, because that's probably important for this game and the podcast with the word. So we go through the various chapters, which the chapter names are clutch, by the way. The first one is To Survive. The second one's name is A Boy's Life of Despair. The third chapter is A Next Generation Legend, Stand Tall, Galactic Hero. Chapter 4 is All-Star Apologies. Chapter 5 is 100-Mile Dash, Pain of a Junk Food Junkie. And chapter 6 is Ultimate Pain, Ultimate Suffering, Ultimate Despair, Ultimate Execution, Ultimate Death.
Oh gosh. Oh my goodness.
So you go through many class trials. Several people have perished or been murdered or been punished for being the murderer. And there's a character in the game. Her name is Sakura Ogawa, and she's the ultimate martial artist. And after the third class trial, I believe, Makoto is helping the ultimate detective like try to figure out what the heck is going on. Why are they in this murder school? There's been a couple of bits of evidence that indicate that there's something going on outside that they refer to as the tragedy. So like some kind of post-apocalyptic event in the background of this school, which was also described as the most awful, most terrible, awful thing to ever happen to humankind, or the tragedy. And so you're helping try to figure that out. And the ultimate detective, Kyoko, found a secret room with a bunch of like files and stuff in it that had been hidden away. And so she asked Makoto to go look through them to see if he's noticed anything that she might not have. And when he's in there, he gets attacked. And we don't see the assailant's face. They've got like a Monokuma mask on. And Makoto wakes up and sees Sakura talking to Monokuma. And she's like, I'm not going to work for you anymore. These are my friends. Like, I will defy you. And Monokuma's like, no, you can't defy me. I'm going to stop you. And then they have like this like epic kung fu battle where they like fly through the air. But Monokuma's a robot. So like, you know, he's going to win over a human, even if Sakura is like the ultimate martial artist and just shredded, ripped. But Makoto passes out after that situation happens, wakes up the next day and is like, did that really happen or was I just dreaming? And he goes out to try to confront them, but Monokuma does another motive before Makoto can ask Sakura about it. So the remaining people that are there at that time, Monokuma goes, I just wanted you to know that there's a spy in your midst, and it's Sakura.
A spy!
And then, a spy! And so it turns out that Sakura had been feeding information to Monokuma about each person and like what their motives were, like what might actually get them to kill someone. Like one of the characters in the previous arc, she was the ultimate gambler and wanted to make more money, so money was used as one of the like motives to get her to try to murder someone. So she's feeding this information, but you also find out that the reason she's feeding this information is that her family dojo and her family is being held hostage by this bear. So she's an unwilling spy. She didn't want to do this, but she gets told that she has to. And so she finally decides, nope, it's not worth it. These people are dying. They're my friends. I'm not gonna feed you this information anymore. So Monokuma outs her to the rest of the group, and then the rest of the group is, of course, super suspicious of her and are worried that she's going to be the next murderer. And so then there's the whole arc of figuring out, like, where Sakura's motives lie. And unfortunately, she does end up dying, and she is the subject of the next class trial.
Oh my.
So this game is nonsense, and the rules that they come up with, like, in the middle, like, I've decided in this time you can only murder 2 people. You can't murder 3, because 2 starts you off as a serial killer, but then there has to be other people for other people to be able to murder stuff. And then, right. And Monokuma will be like, as of right now, only boys are allowed in the boys' locker room and only girls are allowed in the girls' locker room. And if you're in the other one, you're going to get shot with a Gatling gun. And you're like, what? And then he points and there's a gun mounted to the ceiling. And you're like, this is fine. So you get these just wild rules that only appear as they become pertinent, I guess, and then they just decide to kind of add things on. And you also get the sense that the game was kind of being developed as it was going, and the whole plot wasn't quite laid out. Especially, there's one character, his name is Yasuhiro, and he's the ultimate clairvoyant. And he, at the beginning of the game, just has like a couple of lines, but he makes it to kind of the last class trial and the last arc of the story, chapter 6. And another character, Aoi, goes, you weren't like this before. And Yasuhiro basically straight up says, like, it's like almost like my character wasn't fleshed out before. Like, they just straight up, like, on the nose point it out, and they're like, yep, we know, and then they move on. And they have, and there's a lot of, like, jokes, and this, the characters are interesting, and the story behind it is weird and wild. Yasuhiro, the one I was just talking about, if you get to know him and, like, give him those presents from the coin slot machine, gives you a story about how he's only right 30% of the time as the ultimate clairvoyant, which is still better than most clairvoyants. And then also, like, that's how he discovered that some hamburgers at grocery stations were only 30% beef because an alien tried to abduct his hamburger, and they gave back 60% of it because it was, like, filtered with pork and filling. So they only took the 30% of his hamburger that was actually cow, because aliens abduct cows. And, like, there's just this crazy nonsense that's in this game that makes me just love it.
How is that pertinent to anything?
It's not. It's just, it stuck out to me and it made me laugh super hard. And I'm like, this game is both the most quirky and the most nonsensical thing that I've ever seen in my life. I am absolutely going to go through the next couple and consume more of this media. The major plot twist at the end, because I just have to talk about it, so spoiler alert. The Monokuma is the main villain, right? And he is actually being controlled by a student. So one of the students is actually the mastermind. Oh, no. And there was a 16th student, which just comes out of left field, right? Like, because, this is convenient now that we have the 16th student. And it turns out one of the characters, her name is Junko, at the beginning had shouted, like, this isn't fair, you can't do this to us, and, like, went to punch Monokuma, and Monokuma, like, hit a thing and she got impaled with spikes. But then you get to the end of the series, and she, it was her twin sister that was pretending to be her, because Junko is actually the ultimate despair, which is part of the greatest, most horrible, awful thing that ever happened to humanity. And so she and her twin sister had decided that they were going to, like, wreak havoc over Hope's Peak, because Hope's Peak was actually meant to be a place for Hope to foster, where, like, all of the best of this generation were going to be safe from the tragedy outside. So people were aware that these kids were in here, and these kids actually lost their memories for the last year, so they didn't remember agreeing to be in Hope's Peak to protect themselves from the tragedy despair, which they never really go into how despair take over the planet and then everyone's sad and killing each other. But it's kind of like a Bird Box situation where it's just this like ambiguous like evil thing that's happening outside these walls. But then Junko, in like a whim to prove that she had power, ended up murdering the person that was in on this whole thing with her. And then she appears for the last class trial and then gets like put on blast to be told or to go through like, you did it. This is what happened. This is all the plot twists of the game. And she is just wild. And you're like, this is the most convoluted nonsense. And the worst part is watching it, it actually kind of makes sense because they do kind of allude to these things. They're just the most obscure, out of left field references that you're like, all right, that's probably nothing. And then you move on. And then at the end, she's like, remember that random obscure thing that you found after Sayaka's murder? That was me. And you're like, okay. So they do tie up most of their plot threads, which I'm impressed with, but they also make you go, what? At every possible turn. And then, of course, they do the, after they've convicted Junko and she's gone through the ultimate punishment and is no longer a player on the field, they get the key to leave. So then they're going to leave and then the doors open up and there's this bright light and then it cuts to credits. So you don't know if the tragedy's completely destroyed humankind and there's nothing out there or if everything's actually just fine. And you're like, curse you. They do have an after credits stinger as well with Monokuma, the bear, laying on the ground and then just starts laughing and he goes, no one can stop me because I am the headmaster of this school. Mwahaha.
All right, sir. Yes, you are.
And so they, it's fine. And they go into the plot hook for like the next game, which I haven't watched or played, but I plan to because I'm now weirdly addicted to the series. So that's what I brought you. I hope you enjoyed.
Yes, it was something else.
It's a ride. And I feel like going into every single murder is one a little bit too spoilery and also like probably very, very long, which is another point I have against this game where they just say the same thing like over and over and over again. Like, but just everyone has to comment on it where it's like, Makoto goes like, she was stabbed with a knife. So you're saying the murder weapon was a knife. Well, how could it be a knife? She had stab wounds. You're like, why?
That's usually how knives work. They go stab.
And I also love that Makoto shouts, like, when he figures something out, he just shouts at the top of his lungs, I got it! Which just, like, imagining that in conversation with person, like if you're trying to figure something out and then you just look at them and go, I got it. Or if they have a contradictory statement and then you just go, you're wrong.
That's usually not how rational people talk.
No, but I guess if you're locked in a murder school, it's probably not the best.
More acceptable there, I guess.
Yeah, it's okay in the murder school. All right, I have two questions for you.
Okay.
All right, so question one is the series title, Dangan Ronpa, is compounded from two Japanese words, Dangan and Ronpa. What do these words mean in English? Is it A, murder school, B, bullet refute, C, happy havoc, or D, potatoes molasses?
Isn't it Happy Havoc?
So Happy Havoc is the name of this series.
Oh,
so
oops.
It's a trick answer. I'm the worst.
What is it?
Bullet refute. So it's there's all those truth bullets.
Oh.
So it's like shooting holes into the argument because it's a Phoenix Wright style like whodunit game. And then Happy Havoc is the name of the first game, and then Goodbye Despair is the name of the next game, I believe. And then Danganronpa is like the series title, like Pokemon being like the series title, and then there's like all the subtitles for each game.
Okay.
All right. Second question. Monokuma gives in the intermissions between days, he gives on a play called Monokuma Theater. In one of them, he gives the secret origin story of Monokuma, in which he was offered to become what animal other than the bear he is now. Was he able to become a tiger, a cat, a popcorn shrimp, or an octopus?
Oh boy. Those are all very good. Let's go with octopus.
No, it's a popcorn shrimp. It's the secret origin story where they were told he could be a shrimp, and then he was like, well, is it like a large shrimp? And the lady, I guess, told him, no, it's a tiny shrimp. We don't have the budget for any larger shrimp. And he's like, I don't want to be a popcorn shrimp. And that's how I became a bear. And you're like, what is happening?
So they had the budget for a bear, but not a larger shrimp?
Not a larger shrimp.
Okay.
And yeah, that's what I have today for Spy. It does fit. It just took me a little while to get there.
No, it's fine. Totally fine. We did get there. It sounds ridiculous, though.
Thank you for letting me rant about this new genre of thing that I'm going to be consuming way too much of the lore for.
I'm glad you enjoy it. I'm glad there's lots of it for you to consume.
And our midway break, we have a Twitter, we have a Facebook page now, and we have me randomly posting excerpts of our podcast on TikTok, that one.
TikTok.
Twitter and Facebook, you can just look up Nerd of the Week at Nerd of the Week, or use the hashtag Nerd of the Week or hashtag NOTWP, to let us know what you would talk about for Spy or what the answer to Allison's quote is going to be.
Speaking of that quote, here it is. I have it right here, and I'll read it for you now. And I'm not at all lost in my document. I totally have the quote. No, it's totally right here. Okay, yeah, I'm going to read it right now.
All right.
Are you ready?
I'm ready. My body is ready.
All right. So it's actually two different people talking to each other, but I'm just going to read it all together. Hopefully the syntax works. We'll see.
Okay.
All right. I wrote a character like you once. He was a spy. I am not a spy. That's what the character said.
Okay, I'll have to think about this one.
It
sounds really familiar.
In your head. I know
it's in the knowledge.
Well, I'll let you ponder that while I give you a summary of my thing that I brought. Mine also takes kind of a while to get to the spy part of it. So we both brought things that are like that. But we'll get there. So I brought a little film called Monkey Business that was made in 1931.
Okay, I have never heard of this.
So it was probably one of my favorite films as a child. It stars the four Marx Brothers, which they were kind of like slapstick comedians, well, like back in the 20s and 30s. I think all the way into like the 60s, honestly. They were doing comedy stuff. So the four of them are Groucho, Zeppo, Chico, and Harpo.
Okay.
To kind of describe them, because probably a lot of people don't know what I'm talking about. So they all...
I feel like Groucho sounds familiar.
I feel like
Maybe
he's one of the more famous ones. Like sometimes you get references to him in other media.
Okay, I feel like I've heard of this guy. All right, I'll stop interrupting.
No, that's okay. That's totally fine. So they all have like their stage persona, and they've made bunches of movies together, and they kind of keep their same persona throughout all of the movies. Oftentimes they either have just their regular names or their characters don't really have names. There's a few times where they have like names for whatever movie it is, but that is not the case for this one. In this one, they're just nameless. So anyway, Groucho, he is, I think, the oldest of them all. And he goes around with like these kind of thick-rimmed glasses and a painted-on black mustache. Like, he doesn't actually have a mustache, but he literally paints it on for every single movie he's in. It's his look. And then he also has a cigar in his mouth, usually. And he wears a suit that's kind of, like, beaten up a little bit, but it has coattails, so, like, one time it looked kind of fancy. So that's kind of his vibe.
Okay, yeah. He's in my... I have a visual of him in my head.
Okay, perfect. Then there's Zeppo, who he actually kind of broke away from making movies with them at one point because he decided he didn't like doing business with his family, essentially.
Fair enough.
It wasn't any bad terms as far as I know, but he just kind of stopped making movies after a while. But he's in this one, and he's kind of like the most normal of them. Like, he just is kind of his normal self. He functions in society just fine, and that's his deal. Then we have Chico, who wears this weird little, like, kind of pointed hat almost. And he always talks with an Italian accent, even though they're not Italian. They're Jewish Americans. So that's his shtick. And then there's Harpo, who has really bright blonde curly hair that almost looks like a wig. And it looks ridiculous. And his thing is he never talks. And he has this weird little, like, kind of walking stick cane sort of thing with a, like, bike horn on the end of it that he honks at people to get their attention. And he does, like, a lot of miming during the movies.
Okay.
And that's his character. And he's kind of like a clown amongst them all. They're all clowns, though. They're all slapstick comedians. But anyway, so that's our characters. So this movie, it opens up with a large steamship somewhere out on the ocean, and then we zoom into the captain and the first mate. And first mate comes rushing up to the captain and says, "There's 4 stowaways in the forward hatch." The captain says, "How do you know there were 4?" And he says, "Well, they were singing Sweet Adeline," which is a famous barbershop quartet piece.
So naturally there has to be 4 people.
Exactly. So then we cut down to the forward hatch, and sure enough, we hear Sweet Adeline being sung. Very poorly. They're not good at it. But it's being sung all right. And then at the end, they all kind of burst out of these barrels. They, like, kind of open up the hatches of the barrels and, like, take a bow to nobody. And that's kind of how we get introduced to them. And they kind of have, like, some plays back and forth about, like, wow, it's so cramped in these barrels. Wish we could get out of them, you know, whatever. Then the first mate comes down with the rest of the sailor crew, and he's like, "We have to find them." They get back in their barrels so they're not seen. And everyone's, like, running around looking all through these different crates and going down all these different aisleways. And then someone trips over the barrels, and the first mate's like, "Get these barrels out here. Take them up to the deck." So they tie a chain around them and start hoisting them up, but the bottoms fall out because they're full of men instead of whatever they're supposed to be full of. And so the first mate, like, finds them. He's like, "There they are." So there's a little cat and mouse chase down there. They manage to actually run up the stairs to the deck, and that's how they get out of the forward hatch. There's a few different little gags where first they kind of come across some instruments where a band had been playing, but they were, like, on break. So they all, like, pick up these instruments and just, like, start playing nonsense. And then at the end, they, like, do a little bow and everyone applauds as though it were great music, but it was absolutely terrible. And then the crew comes back and starts chasing them again, so they rush off. Then they come across, like, a bunch of older ladies who are, like, sitting on the deck all wrapped up in little blankets. So they take these blankets and they, like, kind of hunch over and, like, act all crotchety, and they kind of get away with it, but then someone notices, "Hey, these aren't ladies," and they run off again. So it's just all these little things of them trying to get away, but still kind of getting caught. As all this is happening, we cut to a little scene of some kind of younger, like, flapper kind of girls, and they're talking to the captain. They're like, "Oh, Captain, tell us about the stowaways." And he says, "Well, as soon as I find them, they're getting locked in the brig." And one of them says, "Oh, that's terribly romantic. I'd love to meet a stowaway." Which I think is just so funny. Anyway, we cut down to right outside the captain's quarters, and Groucho comes running down the stairs, and the captain is standing right there. But Captain doesn't know what he looks like. He doesn't suspect that he's a stowaway. So Groucho kind of fast talks and, like, confuses the captain. And he ends the whole thing with, like, "And good day, sir." And he just, like, opens the door and walks into the captain's quarters. And as he does that, Chico tumbles down the stairs and, like, sneaks in as well. Well, of course, the captain goes after them, but they hide behind the door so he misses them, and he walks into, like, his bedroom or whatever, and they're left in the main office space. So they, like, order some lunch, they kind of look around at the maps, and they kind of banter back and forth with each other a little bit. When they're kind of bantering back and forth, they really like to speak in puns, which is, like, terribly, like, oh, come on, really? It's silly, though. Finally, lunch comes, and the maitre d' brings the lunch into the captain's bedroom. They sneak in after and then sit down at the captain's table with him there. Like, the audacity. And he says, what is the meaning of this? And they go, hey, we're a couple of big stockholders in this company. The captain looks at him, he's like, stockholders? I think you look like a couple of stowaways. And Groucho muses, the stockholder of yesterday is the stowaway of today.
Roll persuasion.
Right. Then Groucho goes on, he's like, all right, so tell us, what do they look like? Which, initially the captain had not known what they look like, but now he's about to start describing them exactly what they look like, so the story is not that great. There's a lot of plot holes. That's okay.
Sure.
We're there for the laughs, not the story. So he says, well, one of them goes around with a black mustache. And Groucho says, well, you can't expect the mustache to go around by itself. Oh, Captain, don't you ever think a mustache gets lonely? And then there's some knocking sound that I think they're making it underneath the table, but the captain thinks it's coming from his closet. So he goes and looks in there, and they lock him in there. The first mate comes in, and Groucho has stolen the captain's hat and, like, puts it on and has his back to the door, and so the first mate doesn't recognize that it's him. He says, how dare you invade the sanctity of the captain's quarters? And the first mate, like, says, oh, I'm so sorry, and tries to leave. And they almost get away with it, but Groucho turns around and takes the hat off too quickly.
Oh, no.
And the first mate notices him.
His hubris.
I know. So the chase starts once again. Now we cut off to Zeppo. He's still running around up on the deck. And he, like, hides behind a door. And suddenly a pretty girl walks through the door. And he kind of, like, gets up next to her and, like, tries some pickup lines. He's like, mighty pretty scenery around here, isn't there? Out in the middle of the ocean.
Yep.
And she, like, kind of shrugs him off, like, leave me alone. But he's persistent. He kind of runs up in front of her and drops a handkerchief and picks it up and is like, oh, is this yours? And she's like, no. But her face, like, she kind of starts smiling, like she's a little bit flattered by getting the attention. And so she takes her own handkerchief that she does have and drops it. And as he, like, kind of walks up behind her, she bends down and picks it up and says, oh my, is this yours? He's like, well, yes, it is. And then they start walking again, linking arms. And they keep commenting about the countryside and how beautiful the trees are this time of year. And it's wonderful.
Yes. Out in the middle of the ocean.
Exactly. And now we finally cut on to Harpo. He has found himself in the children's area, and there's a puppet show going on. Now, as I already described, he kind of looks ridiculous.
Okay.
And he's also really good at making really ridiculous faces. So he kind of gets behind the puppet show stage and puts his own head up there and is kind of, like, involving himself with the puppets, and they're, like, hitting him with their little puppet bats and things like that. And the kids are just loving it. They're roaring in laughter. And then the first mate comes in because he thought he saw him go in here. And he realizes that's him up on the stage. So he goes behind there and, like, pulls him down below the stage. And then they pop back up and the first mate is, like, strangling him, like, has his hands around his neck and he's shaking him back and forth. Just then, the captain walks in with a little girl who he's, like, delivering to the area. And he looks up at the stage and, like, takes a second turn, essentially, and sees him. And he's like, first mate, what are you doing? You've been drinking again, haven't you?
Oh, no.
And as they're having this little argument, Harpo, like, sneaks back below the stage and puts the puppet back up in his place. So the captain, he just sees this actual real puppet. And he, like, even, like, he grabs it and he's like, yeah, this is a puppet, come on. And so the first mate is like, okay, sir, yes, I'll go back to my quarters. Just then, again with the hubris, Harpo kicks out and tries to, like, kick the captain in the butt with his foot. And the captain's like, oh, wait, I think you're right. And so they grab the foot and they start tugging on it. And you can see, like, above the stage, like, Harpo looks like he's struggling to stay up there. But then he, like, disappears. He just walks around to the other side of the stage. There's still this random leg just hanging out.
Oh, no.
And you watch as they just, like, pull this fake mannequin leg out. They realize, like, oh, no, it wasn't him. And they turn around and he's just, like, running out the door. Now we're going to cut to Chico. Gosh, there's lots of, in the beginning, setup of them just doing shenanigans on the boat.
It's quite fun. I'm enjoying it.
It's what most of the story is, honestly. It's just, what can they get up to on the boat? So Chico has now found himself in the barber salon or nail salon, and he's just kind of, like, chatting with the manicurist, and she's like, do you want your nails cut long or short? And he's like, oh, you know, got about an hour and a half. I haven't got anything else to do. Definitely not what she was asking. Then Harpo walks in. He makes a face at her, and she's like, ah, and runs away. Like, he's just a guy. Come on. Not that scary. But anyway, so then they're left alone in the barber shop. The captain comes in, and they, like, quickly see him coming, and they dress up in the barber uniforms. And I don't think that it might not be the captain. One of the crew members comes in because he doesn't recognize them at all.
Okay.
And he's like, have you seen the Stowaways? And they're like, nah. But would you like a show or a shave while you're here? He says, all right, give me a quick once-over. So he gets in the chair and promptly falls asleep. And he has this huge handlebar mustache. And they're like, all right, just give it one little snip over there. And so Harpo gives one of the sides of the mustache a little snip. And then Chico says, no, that's no good. It's too short over there. And we need to do a snip over here. So they do another one. And they just, like, keep getting uneven and snipping closer and closer.
Oh,
He's
no.
like, how about one snip right in the middle? And they, like, completely shave off his whole mustache.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
So is there his fault, I guess, for falling asleep when he's getting a mustache shave?
Right? It's totally his fault. And we don't see how that resolves. We cut to a new scene. Okay, so finally we're actually going to get to the meat of the story, like the actual conflict, which these guys, they're not the main characters. They really have nothing to do with the conflict. They just happen to be on the boat.
They're the B-plot. Got it. Okay.
Exactly. First off, we see this beautiful lady. She's wearing what looks like kind of a dressing gown and, like, fancy silk pajamas, and she's angrily pacing back and forth while her gangster husband is getting ready to go out.
Okay.
And so she's kind of, like, picking an argument with him, and she's like, now listen here, Alky Briggs, you can't keep me cooped up like this. I've played second fiddle on this ship long enough.
That is, like, the most 1930s gangster name ever.
Right? Alky Briggs. So anyway, he says, no, just keep out of sight like I told you to. And I have no time for games. I'm after Joe Helton, and he can't get away from me on this boat. So that's the plot. Alky Briggs is out to kill some other guy, Joe Hilton, who may or may not also be a gang leader, but he's some sort of, like, financial wizard. He's a millionaire. So he probably has a gang as well.
Are these guys, like, in, like, pinstripe suits?
Oh, yes.
That's exactly what I'm picturing right now.
Yes, absolutely.
Perfect.
Fedoras, pinstripes, those fancy, like, white and black shoes. Yeah, they definitely look gangster.
Perfect.
So, just as this is happening, we see that Groucho had just been chilling on the deck. No one was chasing after him for a second. But then the first mate starts coming up to him, so he gets up out of his chilling chair that he was in and throws it in the way, and he runs down a random hallway, and just so happens he passes, like, a laundry guy, someone who's delivering the laundry, and he steals some of the clothes off of the rack and, like, holds them over his head, so the first mate kind of runs past him and doesn't realize who he is, and he gets into the Briggs' room, which apparently their door was unlocked, and he just runs into the closet, and they're kind of so wrapped up in their argument that they don't seem to mind that someone has just broken into their room and gone into their closet.
It's fine. This is normal.
Exactly. And they're just, like, arguing about how she's never let out to do anything fun, and he just needs to get on with business, and he's just so done with this conversation, Alky is, and he just kind of, like, leaves mid-sentence, and she's Alky, no! And
real mature Alky.
Right. So then she, like, goes over to the closet and starts actually, like, trying to figure out what Groucho's doing in there. Like, what are you doing in that closet?
Oh, now we're going to address the random guy in the closet.
Yes,
Got it.
yes.
Okay.
It has not escaped her attention. She just had other things to deal with first.
You know, priorities. I can respect that.
So he does his fast-talking, confusing thing again. He comes out a different door of the closet. This is real luxurious of a room that they're in. There's like...
Especially on a boat.
I know. It's like this big main room that they're in. There's this huge walk-in closet, and then there's even another room in this whole suite.
Oh, man.
So yeah, it's pretty fancy. So anyway, he goes out the other door and he says, "Did you see me go in the closet?" She goes, "Oh, well, no." And he says, "Well, am I in the closet now?" He's, "No." "Well, Your Honor, I rest my case."
Oh.
And she kind of gets like a sly smile, like, "Oh, I didn't know that you're a lawyer," which he's not.
Roll deception.
Right? And she kind of comes up with a plan, and she starts talking like, "I'm young, I want to be free, I want ha-cha-cha, I want excitement."
Ha-cha-cha.
Ha-cha-cha. And there's a guitar, and like while she's like saying all that, she kind of starts dancing, and he just like starts playing the guitar for a few seconds, and it's kind of silly. He does it a few times as she's going on. She just like gets into these moods like as she's going on about things, and she starts just dancing and saying, "I need excitement in my life." Like, come on, Elkie, just take your wife out once in a while. It'll
Right?
be fine.
Just go to a bar for 5 minutes.
Yeah. Gosh. Anyway, then she goes on. She's like, "From the time he got that marriage license, I've led a dog's life." And Groucho says, "Are you sure he didn't get a dog's license?"
Oh, no.
Oh. He
Also,
says,
like, straight up, my dog lives a better life than I do, so I would be fine being a dog.
right. But this was the 1930s. I don't know if it was the same.
That's fair. That's valid.
So then he says, "Now, ma'am, before I get through with you, you'll have a clear case for divorce, and so will my wife." Which kind of innuendos there. This whole plot is kind of full of innuendos, which I'll get to at the end of all this.
Okay.
Inexplicably, oh my gosh. How do I say that word?
Inexplicably? Oh, God. Inexplicably.
Inexplicably,
Yeah.
they now begin to tango around
Nailed
the
it.
room. So they're just tangoing, and there's, background music, but I don't know if they could hear the background music in their little world.
Through the power of movie magic.
Yes, the power of movie magic. So they break off, and they're like just kind of spinning on their own for a second. And then Alki comes back in the door, and Groucho like has his eyes closed, just like spinning around, and like spins into Alki, but doesn't realize it's him, thinks it's still the wife, and like starts kind of dancing with her.
Oh, no.
And then like he goes to like kiss her on the cheek and realizes, oh no, this is not her, this is Alki. And so, like, the dancing stops, of course, and he says, "Sir, this is an outrage, breaking into a man's home. There'll be a letter in the Times tomorrow morning."
But
Like,
didn't you
trying
see
to-
him break into the house at the beginning when he got into the closet? Now he cares?
Oh, no, it's Groucho saying this to Alki.
Oh, I got it.
Yes.
Okay, I'm here.
Yes, the MO is confuse and abuse.
If you're gonna be a bard, that's the way to do it, so...
So he says, "This is an outrage. She'll see the letter tomorrow morning." And Alki goes, "Yeah, but you won't read it, because I'm gonna lay you out pretty."
Oh.
And Groucho's
no.
like, "This is the thanks I get for freeing an innocent girl. Well, I bid you good day, sir. Good day." And he goes back in the closet, and Alki just, like, lets him go.
I said
And
good day, sir.
Exactly. Which, I guess it worked. Alki was kind of confused. But he kind of gets that spark of inspiration, too, after talking to Groucho for 5 seconds. Mm-hmm. And he's like, "Hey, come out of there. I want to talk to you." So Alki, he's still kind of being threatening. He has a gun in his pocket that he's pointing at Groucho. And he's like, "Hey, you've got some nerve coming in here. Any last words before I kill you?" And Groucho, in the most unexpected turn of events, says, "Do you think girls think less of a boy if he lets himself be kissed?" And so this completely takes Alki off guard.
Oh my
and
God.
he's like, "Yeah, I could use a guy like you." And then Just then, again, inexplicably, Zeppo finds himself in the room because the door was unlocked. And Alky's like, do you know this guy? And Groucho's like, well, yeah, he used to live in the next barrel to me. And he says, oh, I see. Stowaways. Well, I can really help you guys. So he's hired them as his, like, backup gang, because his whole gang is not on the boat with him, while he plans to go to Joe Hilton's stateroom, and his plan is to either get Joe to either, like, back or acknowledge his gang or something like that, or if not, he's going to kill him. I don't know his whole racket, what he has out for Joe Hilton. Gang wars, you know.
Right.
Yeah. So anyway, he gives Zeppo and Groucho some guns, which they do not like. He's like, you gotta keep the windows covered while I go in. So they run out of the stateroom first. They pass a bucket of mop water and they drop their guns in there, but then they all go on to Joe Hilton's room. Quick cut to Harpo, just to check in on what he's up to right now. He finds a fountain, and inexplicably, lots of things are unexplained, apparently.
I gotta look up a synonym for inexplicably, because neither of us can say this.
Right? So anyway, for whatever reason, out here on the ocean, there's a fountain, and also there's a frog living in the fountain, which Harpo kind of honks his little horn at, and he captures it in his top hat, and then puts that back on his head. So now he just has a frog friend living in his hat.
You know, that's kind of living your best life.
Yeah, exactly. That's kind of what Harpo's whole deal is. Like, let him live his best life, let him do his shenanigans.
He's just vibing.
Yeah,
he's just vibing, no.
Exactly. So then, as he has this frog in his hat, he's just kind of strolling around, and he sees these two older guys playing chess, and he sits down and, like, is watching them. And, of course, he's being all quiet because he doesn't speak, and they're fine with that. And then Chico kind of comes up, and he looks at him as well. One of the guys goes to move a chess piece, and Harpo grabs his hand and, like, shakes his head at him, like, no, that's a bad one. You don't want to do that. And the other guy, like, he's like, you're intervening. This is not allowed. I need an officer. These two are interfering with our chess game.
They're ruining our chess game. I need the police.
Exactly. So Chico and Harpo, they pick up the chessboard. Chico's like, it's too loud here. And they just kind of start slowly walking away while these two old guys are just, like, throwing a fit, and they don't realize that they're even walking away with their chess game. So they walk down a hallway, and it happens to be Joe Hilton's room. Before they get there, we see kind of Joe's character. He's sitting there in, like, a fancy dressing gown, reading the paper, and a waiter comes in to take his food away, and he gives him a really generous tip. So we're like, all right, this is a good guy. We like him. And in the newspaper, we see that he's reading an article about himself. So he's not necessarily in a gang. He is some sort of, like, famous, well-to-do man about town kind of thing. And it says that Joe Hilton, the millionaire, is returning to America, and his daughter, who's just recently finished finishing school, is coming as well. And so just then, Mary, who actually is the pretty girl that Zeppo was talking to about the countryside earlier, happens to be Joe Hilton's daughter, comes walking in. Exactly. And she's like, Dad, you're not even dressed yet. And he's like, we're big shots now, Mary. You can do all the dressing for the family.
What does that mean?
Just like, he doesn't care he's not dressed. He's gonna lounge in his dressing gown all day.
Okay, mood.
So anyway, as they're, like, having this little exchange, Alky Briggs walks through the door.
Oh, no.
Actually, he's polite. He knocks first.
Oh, wow.
And Joe, in a really dumb move, doesn't ask who it is first. He just says, come in.
Oh, man. Classic blunder.
I know. Classic blunder. So Alky comes right on in, and Joe's like, Mary, why don't you step into the other room? So she, kind of scared, like, goes into the other room. Like, she's right to be a little leery of Alky. So then, Alky and Joe kind of start arguing about their gangs and whatever, and I'm gonna kill you if you don't do what I'm asking. I'm not doing you any favors. So just then, Chico and Harpo walk into the room with their chess set, and Joe and Alky are still being too loud for them, and it's too loud for chess. So Harpo hits Alky over the head with his little horn walking stick, but somehow how he ends up holding it looks like he's actually pointing it like a rifle at Alky. And so Alky throws his hands up, and then Harpo tries to play patty cake with him with his upheld hands.
Patty cake, not patty cake.
And Alki turns back to Joe. He's like, so, you've got your gang with you. Well, I'll get you later. And he just storms out. And Joe, like, doesn't
like they're
go
not on
after.
a boat and they're not going to immediately deal with it.
Right? So Joe comes up to the two guys and he's like, why are you in my room? He's just like thankful. He's like, you scared a pretty tough egg out of this room. Do you want to make some money? And of course they do. Mm-hmm. And so he's trying to hire them to be his bodyguard. He's like, how tough are you? And they're like, well, if you pay a little bit, we're a little bit tough. You pay a lot, we're a lot tough. And they do a little demonstration of just how tough they are. There's a few times of like Chico hyping up Harpo, trying to get him to like punch him really hard. And eventually by the end, Harpo gets real hyped and he goes like, and like just sucker punches him in the throat and he falls down.
God. Not a throat punch.
Right? He's like, see, we're plenty tough. And Joe is impressed. He's like, gentlemen, now I can walk on the deck in peace.
Uh-huh. Sure.
While this is all happening, from the window, Groucho is still working, or thinks he's working for Alki, and he just pops his head in the window and says, I'm spying on you. No one acknowledges it. Nothing ever comes of this. But he's spying on them.
He's just watching.
Yeah.
He's just vibing.
Yeah. So anyway, Joe walks out onto the deck. Chico and Harpo immediately lose him in the crowd, and they start following the wrong guy. Joe did give them some guns as well, and they are not at all subtle with them. They're just, like, holding them out. And people, like, whoever they're following, whoever they're tailing, just in a wake behind them is people, like, going, oh no, a gun, oh no! And they just don't realize it at all. Mm-hmm. We then cut to Alki, and he's rounding back up with Groucho and Zeppo. He's like, why didn't you get him? And they're like, we don't know. We can't. I don't know. And he gives them more guns after he realizes that they no longer have the guns he had given them. Oh, God. Spoiler alert, nothing ever comes of the guns. This is kind of the last time we see them. So don't worry about any of that. Nothing's happening. Later, we see Joe kind of lounging in his chair. He thinks his bodyguards are, like, in the shadows, watching over him. He doesn't realize that they are completely gone somewhere else. So Groucho comes on up. He's like, you're just the person I want to see. So there's 2 guys trying to attack you, and 2 guys trying to protect you, which is 50% waste. Now, what if your own bodyguard were to attack you? Well, you'd be saved, and it's 100% waste. But I'll attack you for nothing. Just like his really fast salesman talk. And, again, confuse and abuse. Joe is just like, what? What?
I'm a little what, but that's all right.
And he's just like, no thank you. Maybe some other time.
No thanks. Try again.
Yeah.
Sun's not in alignment. No
not
sacrifice
today.
day.
Yeah. So that's the end of that. Cut to another day. So the ship is coming into port. And there's an announcement where you're supposed to have your landing cards and your passports ready, please. Now, of course, the stowaways have neither of these things because they are stowaways. And we're kind of cutting to their various activities of what they're trying to do to maybe try and get off the boat. So first we see that Groucho kind of intercedes with a little mini press conference that's happening with an opera singer, and this causes much outrage because he asks very insulting questions, like, is it true that you're going to go on a diet? Is it true that your husband is going to divorce you as soon as he regains his eyesight? Just, like, very mean questions.
Wow.
I know, and that doesn't lead anywhere. He does not get off the boat that way. Then Zeppo is with Mary, and he says, I'm so concerned I may never see you again once we get off this boat. And she says, does it matter to you that you'll never see me again? And he says, nothing matters more. Mary, I'll never leave you. And just then an officer comes running up to them, and Zeppo has to jump away and run away.
Of course.
Right after he promised he'd never leave.
Mm-hmm.
And then we see they all kind of get up to, like, the gangplank to get off the boat, and they've stolen someone's luggage on the way out, and they just try and walk right off. And they're like, where's the passport? Where's the passport? And they're like, we don't have one. And they're like, get back in line. Go away. That, like, doesn't put them in jail or anything. Just makes them go back and figure themselves out. Mm-hmm. So they turn to Harpo and they're like, well, it's up to you to get us a passport. So first he tries to pickpocket a guy, which obviously doesn't work. And then Zeppo comes running up and he says, you know who's on this boat? Maurice Chevelle, the movie actor. I just ran into him. And Groucho says, how do you know it was him? And Zeppo's like, because I got his passport. So there we go. We have a passport.
Everything's fine now.
But none of them look like this guy.
But it's fine. Everything's fine.
Nothing close to this guy. And so they're like, okay, so to be convincing, we just have to sing one of his songs. And so the song they picked to sing is You Brought a New Kind of Love to Me, which starts, if a nightingale could sing like you, they'd sing much sweeter than they do. Sorry for the singing.
Oh, it's fine. You're doing good.
So they all have to try and sing that like this actor would sing it. And apparently he has like a very distinct style, which they are, spoilers, not able to mimic. We'll get to that here in a second.
Like if the beginning of this movie is any indication, these guys are not opera singers.
Exactly. So first we see Zeppo. He like cuts in the line. They try and like make this big distraction and a hullabaloo so that Zeppo can like sneak up to the first part of the line. And they give off the passport and they're like, I'm Maurice Chevelle. And they're like, this picture doesn't look like you. He's like, sure, it's me. I'll sing for you. But they aren't buying it and they're like, just get back in line, and they like push him to the back. So next, Chico kind of has wormed his way up to the front of the line, and of course, doesn't look like him either. And again, he's speaking in his Italian accent, and he's like, but from the back, it looks exactly the same. Now listen, I sing it for you. And he sings, and of course, very badly. And they're like, go away, go to the back of the line. So they're just like going through them all. Then Groucho, of course, comes up. And they're like, hey, this picture doesn't look like you. This man doesn't have a mustache. And he says, well, the barber was closed this morning. And again, tries to sing and fails.
Oh, no.
And now it's finally Harpo's turn, which he really doesn't look like this guy, and he doesn't talk. So what's going to happen here? Well, he starts singing, and it's perfect.
Oh,
but
man.
Then the tone kind of wavers, and it gets slower and slower. And we start to see, like, he turns around, and he has a little, like, mini gramophone attached to his back that needs to be wound up. And so he, like, tries to wind it back up, and, like, the singing speeds up, and it gets perfect again. And the officer's like, no, you can't do this. And then the officers, like, try and grab him, but he starts, like, just destroying their paperwork. He's, like, grabbing onto the table and like just ripping papers everywhere and like putting stamps on everything and everyone, and like this huge havoc. But then suddenly a man runs up to the doors, wiping his brow and like looking very ill. He's like, I have to get off the boat. I'm a sick man. I feel faint. And he does faint. He's of no importance. We never know his name. Just important that he fainted. And so someone's like, we need a doctor. Someone call a doctor. And somebody runs past Groucho, who's just kind of like chilling in a corner trying to figure out what to do. And they're like, are you a doctor? And he says, well, yes. Where's the horse? And just he like steals a little bag that looks like a doctor bag, but it probably isn't. And he like just runs up to this guy who's fainted, and he like just gets close to him and like looks at him. He's like, well, there's nothing I can do for this man. He's fainted. Now, everyone, please gather close so he won't recover. We need to get him off the boat right away. So they bring out a stretcher. Somehow,
that's how medicine works.
Right. So they bring out a stretcher with some blankets on it, and the stowaways all manage to get on the stretcher under the blankets. And I don't know how no one noticed that the man who's fainted is not on the stretcher. But they all get taken off the boat. And then once they're down there, they, like, throw the blankets off and they, like, wave at the captain as they run away. But there's nothing the captain can do about it now. Somehow, there's no way he can do anything about it. So that's how they got off the boat. So now they're in New York, and it's the night of Hilton's party, introducing his daughter. And before we get there, we see Alki talking to his gang members, and he says they're going in disguised as musicians, and they have to keep an eye on the daughter. So we get to the party. It's very lavish. It's a costume party. And you can kind of think like Roaring 20s-esque. Like that sort of vibe to it. Just insane amounts of champagne. And like all the costumes are fancy. And it's incredible.
Flappers everywhere.
Exactly. So Mary comes skipping down the stairs. She is not in costume. She's just in like a fancy dress. And she sees Zeppo at the bottom. He's come! And she's so excited that he came. She was worried that he wasn't going to. And they start dancing. And she just has this really funny offhand remark about the costume party that was held for her. She's just looking around. She's like, my, there's a lot of strange looking people here. It's like, they're called costumes, honey. Did you not get the memo?
To your own party.
Yeah. But whatever. Then we kind of cut to Groucho. He's just like socializing with people, saying like funny offhanded things to them. None of it really matters. Just like he's getting around, introducing himself. Then Joe Helton, between songs, he's like calling attention. He brings out this real fancy like wreath, or kind of like what people might design to stand in front of for their wedding ceremony, like just like a background of flowers, essentially.
Oh, the arc thing. It's got a specific name, but I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, so like they bring out one of those, and Joe begins his little speech with, I'd like to introduce you to the sweetest little thing. And then from the back of all this foliage, Harpo just bursts through and like makes this ridiculous face at the audience. And so all the butlers like come up and just like pull him off the stage real quick. Then we cut to Groucho. He goes out to the veranda for some air, and we see Alki is prowling around outside. Like he's just kind of pacing back and forth, not doing much. And Alki warns him, like, you need to keep an eye on Hilton's daughter for us. We're going to kidnap her and take her to the old barn. So, like, completely gives away exactly all his plan to someone that may or may not actually be working for him still. And he goes off and prowls around some more, and we find his wife has also been in the garden. I think she snuck into the party, and Alki didn't know that she was going to be there. But she comes up and also finds Groucho. They banter back and forth again about how unhappy she is. And then Alki kind of comes back and spots her from a distance, and he comes running up, and she runs away. And he says to Groucho, what are you doing here? I told you to spy on Hilton. He says, well, I did. Alki's like, well, what was he doing? He's
I'm
like,
spying on you.
He's like, he was spying on me. So anyway, just kind of, Groucho obviously not doing whatever Alki wants him to do. Something that these movies that the Marx Brothers make all have hallmarks of, they have musical numbers at some point during the film, because Chico is actually a classically trained pianist, and he usually does like a really kind of humorous piano number, like very well performed, but just like has musical humor in it, which is hard to describe. And then Harpo is a classically trained harpist, and so he always gets to play a number as well. So that's just something that happens in the interim here. At one point, a butler comes in for Mary, and he's like, there's someone here to see you. And she says, Zeppo, excuse me just a moment. I'll hurry right back. Which, dun dun dun. Mm-hmm. No, she won't be. Cutting back to kind of the party, Joe gives a paper to Groucho and says, hey, announce the singer for me. I can't make out the name. And so Groucho goes, attention everyone, there'll be a buffet dinner served in the next room, and in order to get you there quickly, Mrs. Schmish, like, completely trips up over the name, will sing a soprano solo in this room. And so then the soprano starts singing something really boring and soprano-y, and Harpo comes up, makes a face at the musicians and scares them all away, and takes over the harp and, like, does his little bit. So conveniently, right at the end of this piece, someone gets Joe's attention and reports that Mary has been kidnapped. Oh no! Who could have done it? And Joe says, it's that Alki Briggs! And Groucho pipes up, they've taken her to the old barn! The only real thing that they've been able to contribute to this entire plot. And so everyone arrives at the barn, and there's kind of a comical little fight scene between Zeppo and Alki of, like, they're trying to get Mary out of the barn, and they're pretty evenly matched, surprisingly. But the rest of the brothers are just, like, sitting around, kind of narrating. Groucho keeps going, like, and they're in the middle ring, and here's an upper punch. Oh, and that was a nasty hit there. And just like a radio announcer. And finally, Joe gets there. Alki is knocked completely out, and they're able to take Mary home. And Joe ends with, remember, Joe Hilton never forgets a friend. And then credits. So
This is delightful.
that is monkey business.
That sounds so fun.
I think of the Marx Brothers movies, of what I can remember, I feel like this is the least plot-driven of the movies.
Okay.
Like, the rest at least have something, like they have particular characters that are actually pertinent to the story.
Sure.
There's another one called A Day at the Races, where Groucho actually is a horse doctor, and he's like one of the main characters that drives the plot. So, yeah, there's different levels of character building in their world, but this one is really all for the goofs and gags.
Grouch is actually a veterinarian. Got it.
Yeah, so actually, that leads me into my questions here.
All right.
What kind of doctor does Groucho pretend to be while on the boat? Is it a pediatrician, a horse doctor, a surgeon, or a lobotomist?
A horse doctor.
Yes.
Otherwise known as veterinarian.
Yes. And then, true or false? When the film first premiered, it was banned in Europe.
Oh. True.
False. But that's just my tricky wording. It was banned in Ireland, so technically part of Europe. But yeah, it was banned in Ireland, both for its innuendos and also for fear of anarchist messages.
Oh, okay.
Which I don't necessarily see where those anarchist messages are, but I've also not extensively studied that.
That's fair.
All right, so that was all I brought for us today.
Beautiful. I have a synonym for inexplicably, strangely.
Strangely, yep, that's perfect. Perfect. Strangely, there was a frog in the pond. Strangely, all the doors are unlocked. Perfect.
All right.
You want me to
quote?
I was going to say, do you want me to read it again?
Yes.
All right. Again, remember there's two characters. Mm-hmm. So, do you want me to say like character A and character B, or just read the quote?
Just read the quote. Okay. You said it well.
Okay, I'll try and replicate that. I wrote a character like you once. He was a spy. I am not a spy. That's what the character said.
Is it Castle?
No, unfortunately not.
Okay, can I have a hint?
It's an early 2000s Disney movie.
Okay. It's right on the tip of my tongue, and I'm going to be mad when you tell me the answer.
Do you want me to give you another hint?
Just give me the answer.
Okay, Princess Diaries.
You're right. Damn it. Dang it.
It's said between the neighbor and the chauffeur. I guess he's not the chauffeur. He is like a bodyguard, but...
Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, yep, and I can visualize him too. Darn it, I knew it was like... Okay, all right.
I knew you knew it.
I knew I was going to be mad too.
It's all right. So, what next?
Very kind and wise generator. What is our word for next week?
The next word is dog.
Dog. That's exciting.
Woof woof.
I know exactly what I'm going to do with dog.
I think I also do know.
Excellent. And remember to tweet at us or message us on Facebook or find our TikToks. And remember, if you enjoyed our podcast or we got a sensible chuckle out of you, please share with one of our friends. One of your friends. One of our friends.
Figure out who we hang out with.
At this point in our podcast, it's probably our friends telling our other friends to listen to our podcast anyway.
All right, here's your challenge, listener. Find somebody who you don't think we know and make them listen to this podcast.
Yes, please. And pass it along, because we're not a pyramid scheme. Thank you, Wise Generator, for our next word. Thank you, listener, for listening to our podcast. This has been Nerd of the Week. I've been Stephanie.
And I've been Allison.
And remember, this is not a pyramid scheme.
Yay! Bye!
Bye!